Okay, let's get started. Thank you for coming, everybody. We've been hearing a lot at the show about how AI can streamline and cut costs in production. Today we've got two vendors who offer very different approaches to subbing, dubbing, and localization, and we've got one real-world user who can give us his perspective on what's working and what's not. So let's jump in by letting each panelist introduce themselves, and then we'll jump to the questions. So, Nick?
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Nick Manoochehri. I work at Google. I lead our AI team for media and entertainment. Been there 6 years, and pretty much we're covering any and all AI projects that are happening in the media and entertainment space. So everything from localization, studios, back office, front office, the whole gamut. Localization is super exciting for us right now because there's so many production use cases happening. So looking forward to chatting about that today and telling you all what we're up to.
My name is Gray Ainsworth from Lionsgate. I oversee our content operations team globally. That basically means once the movies and television shows are finished being produced, they get turned over to us, and then we manage them for the rest of their lives throughout their distribution supply chain. And one significant area in that is localization and the transformation of that content.
I am Justin Beaudin, CEO of Adapt Global. I've been in the media industry for about 20 years. I started at NBC Universal, running their internal technical operations, then left and did my first startup, which was acquired by Deluxe. So I first met Gray on the vendor side. Ended up sort of, understanding what localization took from traditional vendors, brick and mortar studios, actors coming in and providing localization services. Left Deluxe, went to Ubiquity as a CTO, got to work with some other people in this room, and came across just some of the new AI technologies that were coming out by providers like Nick, and just felt like it was going to change everything, but there would be a need for experts in localization and expert linguists that would be useful in this, and it wouldn't just be a pure tech approach. And so today Adapt is a AI-enabled dubbing provider with providers like Google or 11 Labs embedded underneath, and of course, LLMs to do the translation and voice generation. But then we're also providing 500 linguists around the world who really care about the dub, and then hopefully we provide a really good product to people back like Gray.
Okay, great. So let's start with captions. Gray, how are you handling captions today? What's the art and the intricacies, and how has that all changed over the last 5 to 10 years?
So captions, I would consider in a group of any text-based localization product and activity. So we're handling it really one of two ways. There is the traditional way where we are using humans throughout the process completely. And then there is AI-generated closed captions as well, or AI-assisted closed captioning as well. So that's where you employ it for head starts along the supply chain. That would include translations. You can use it for certain key name and phrases creation for those lists. You can use it for spotting. But then there really still, in our perspective, still needs to be a human overlay there. There are some real intricacies, I think, with closed captioning that are really hard to automate. How they're placed, the length of the phrases, the words that are actually used, the interpretation. Sometimes if you're doing closed captioning on unscripted content, that is an art form in itself in trying to interpret what people are saying and how they're saying it and what their intent is in their saying it, and translating that into an effective caption really does still need some human interaction with it. But we really are seeing some pretty amazing head starts in it. We did a project, in fact, with Adapt, where we did some automated closed captioning on this for a talk show, and it proved to be very complex. We went through multiple rounds of refinement until we came up with the recipe that worked for that particular show. That recipe may not work for a different show, and so I think you have to go through that each time, test the recipes that fits for that particular use case, and then you can go with it that way.
Okay, thank you for that. Justin, why don't you describe Adapt TV's service for captions, or Adapt service for captions, and talk about accuracy, speed, and cost?
Yeah, I mean, to me, in the TV process, captions is the first step on the train, right? Like a first stop on the train, right? You're going to get someone's content, you're going to transcribe it, We tend to transcribe with either 11 Labs Scribe or Speechmatics, which are both leaders in the industry. And we're feeding them the output of that transcription through an LLM to clean some things up, to give that human a head start, and then the human's going to go through and clean it up and make it look really good. And then you're always going to play with new AI tools, right? Like if you know a lot about captioning, you know that when you go off screen, you have to italicize the caption. So if the camera goes off of me and I'm still talking, it's got to go to italics. If music comes in, you have to drop a music note. And so like these are all the little things that the final 5% is always the hardest 5%. And that's where I think Adapt will still have a place, even though you guys have probably never heard of this company, Google. Even though they're big and powerful, there's still a place for Adapt to come along and do some final cleanup on that. And that when our caption service, what we offer is that full, complete service with all of that in there. And then one day somebody might come along with a great tool to say, hey, the camera's gone, 12 Labs, which is a really cool video analysis company that's gotten a lot of attention lately, might be able to figure out, oh, it's gone off camera. I'll automatically italicize that. And when they do, we'll move that from human to automated. For right now, though, that is a human-driven task, doing that italics as an example.
What can you tell us about cost?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think captions traditionally are anywhere from $15 to $10 a minute for like a really nice done broadcast caption. Adapt will do captions for $5 a minute all the way down to $1 per minute. So that gives you like a sense. And a lot of it, like with this project we did for Grace, you have to figure out what it is. Like talk shows are complicated because unlike this where we're all talking in a very organized fashion, people are yelling at each other, they're stepping over each other. And so you have to handle all that. And so you have to kind of look at the content and say, how are we going to price this for this content? And I think that's, again, where you have to sit down and say, all right, what is this show going to look like? How are we going to do these 80 episodes of the show?
What's the motivation? I mean, there's a legal motivation, there's a monetization motivation. What's driving people to caption more today than 5 years ago?
I mean, you guys can jump in here too. I mean, there are things like the European Accessibility Act, right, which is going in place, which is saying you need to do more of that. And then there certainly are requirements out there for captioning. I think just generally you want your content as accessible as possible because then more people can consume it. And generally cost has been a barrier to accessibility. And now that cost is going down, you can jump over that barrier more often. And I think that's a good thing.
In a world where content is so prevalent in so many locations, cutting through to the audience and connecting your content to the right audience is a really big piece of it. And so audience engagement is one of those top 5 northern lights, if you will, or northern stars about how you actually connect with your audience. And captioning is actually one of those ways to do it. If you offer that in an effective way, aside from the legal requirements, which sometimes dictates you just have to do it, we'll choose to do it anyway because it's a form of audience engagement, and we find that it drives better adoption and more views and all the things that flow from that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one point on why now. I think with a lot of AI use cases, you need 100% accuracy for it to go to production. Think about like some HR system you want to automate. With captioning, you can get away with like a 99 or 98% accuracy rate. So it's a use case you can actually bring to production that it can use AI, and it doesn't need to be exactly 100% accurate for it to work.
It's an interesting point because there's a big difference between captioning for scripted content that is scheduled and live captions. And I think AI actually offers a better experience in live captions than the human base, because I don't know if you watch live captions on a sporting event or a live news event or something like that. I mean, the error rate is pretty high if you watch that.
Nick, tell us about Google's offering in these in captions.
Yeah, I think for captioning, it's super exciting for us because so much has changed just over the past few months. So if you go back like 18 months or 12 months ago and you wanted to do captioning with AI, you would need to pick a model, whether it's closed source or open source, and use that model to generate your captions. There would be some error rate associated with it. Like maybe you could get it to 50% or 60%. If you wanted to improve that, you'd need to decide, do I want to use a human to bring it up to an acceptable standard, or do I want to fine tune a model to improve that accuracy rate? There's obviously data engineers, data scientists, infrastructure that's needed for fine tuning. it worked really well. And just over the past 2 months, we're seeing our frontier models get so good at captioning that you actually don't need fine tuning to get it up to an acceptable standard. So there's a path now where you can decide, do I want to fine tune or continue to do that if my model's working good? Or do I want to just go all in with kind of like the GA frontier model? It gives people a lot of choice. And this has just been kind of like new over the past 2 months. So just with prompting and a few shots of examples, you can get the models to have a really good output. So we're very excited about that.
What's the cost structure look like?
Tokens in, tokens out. We're seeing anywhere from like 2 to 5x cost reduction, depending on which way you go. So a lot of upside and very easy to use.
What's a 2 times cost reduction?
Yeah,
What does that mean?
let's talk about. Justin talked about cost per minute, so why don't you address that?
Yeah, so I think when you look at the overall cost and what people were paying to generate captions, in a particular language, you would compare that cost to what it takes to upload a video, to a model, use that, and then get a output on what the output would cost to generate the output. So if you want to talk later about it, I'm happy to go into more detail, but it seems like probably some more questions here on the overall cost. So happy to go into that later.
Nick, talk about what the typical project looks like. Or is it somebody uploading a movie and getting back captions? Or, it's hands-on, hands-off, and I'll go back to Justin in a second. But the typical person who works with Google Cloud, what does that look like from their perspective?
I think there's a number of ways to get started. We have everything from Google AI Studio, which is kind of like our consumer-based version on how to use a lot of these tools. We have our Google Cloud Console, which is more of like when you're getting into the developer side of things. And you can call a number of these APIs either in the Google Cloud Console or into your existing workflows. So I think it really depends on how people want to leverage these APIs. Do you want to build a new pipeline, a new workflow, or is it going to be integrated into something that's existing?
Justin, same question for you. How are people working with your company to produce captions?
Yeah, we're a managed service provider at the end of the day. So we are on AWS Marketplace. Maybe one day we'll run on GCP. But really, you work with us like you used to work with Deluxe or Iuno. You come to us and you say, here's my video, and I need captions back, and we will figure out a slick way to do that via a portal, or we'll just do it over a massive upload download link. That's what we're adding on top. And I think our hope is I don't see Nick as a competitor. Nick's just a piece of the puzzle. And the SaaS tool sets are way cheaper than what we offer. Like if you go to Google or AWS SaaS for this stuff, it's pennies on the minute, but it's that extra control that we add hopefully on top that makes it worthwhile for Gray to keep coming to Adapt and not go straight to Nick. That's the idea. But
yeah, I'll say I definitely don't see us as competitors, because every company or group we talk to, they say, this all looks great, but how can we actually get started quickly and not go rebuild this entire pipeline? I think that's where Justin's tool set fits in.
You should have seen him before the event. Great, let's talk about dubbing. How do you approach dubbing? I know you talked a little bit about scripted versus unscripted. And again, what's the art and what's the science?
So localization in a dubbing form is obviously becoming a necessity to take advantage of the global marketplace based on your rights. So this has escalated in importance to a content owner multiple times over the last 5 years, and certainly over the last 20. So we take it seriously. We have been testing AI in the dubbing space for the last 2 years now. Doing a lot of bake-offs, bringing a lot of different kinds of content in, trying to determine which tools work best for certain kinds of instances. And we've come out probably very similar to what some of you have also been talking about in the marketplace. For us, we don't find it quite there yet for scripted content, for high-end scripted content like Lionsgate. We think it is good enough for scripted content for certain fill-in applications. If you're doing a dub job and there's a character that just has one short line, it's off screen, something like that, you might use a synthetic voice to fill that in. If you're revisiting an old dub, maybe something was dubbed in Spanish 30 years ago to an edited version, and now you want it in the original theatrical version, so you have to fill in 4 minutes of content. Those actors aren't available anymore, or maybe they are and they don't sound like they did 30 years ago. You can actually use it to effectively fill that in and restore the original version. But that's about the limits we've seen on scripted content in use. Being perfectly candid, we just find that it holds up pretty well in short bursts, but over the long period, it's just not quite there yet. For unscripted content, we do actually think that there are real applications for it today. And so our message to our sales team as of right now is it's fair game. If there is any content that you feel like you cannot monetize because of traditional costs, come to us, we'll talk about it, and I'm sure we can put a plan together. I'm actually encouraging our team to not refer to it as AI dubbing anymore. It's just a budget service or a value service. That's all it is. And you may use AI a greater percentage of that process than you would have otherwise in order to reduce the cost. And that is a sliding scale. You can set that where you think that needs to be in order to get like that recipe that I talked about earlier, to get the kind of results that you think you need at the price point that you think you need. So we have done some unscripted content in that way in some languages. I also think it's important that you inform the end customer that that's what it is, because they will take their usual lens of quality control and evaluate it when it comes in, and they will reject it every single time. But if they know that you wouldn't get this otherwise, this was done at that budget level, we think it's responsible, we don't think it's embarrassing, but you're going to find some issues, so you're going to need to adjust your bar to accept this, and the economics have all taken those things into consideration. That works much better than just delivering it and hoping for the best, because the best doesn't happen in most cases that we have found. So so it is growing in the AI tool sets are growing in importance in the traditional supply chain for dubbing. We are encouraged by what we see. We still think there's a ways to go. It still requires a lot of human interaction, particularly for high-end content. But we monitor it almost every 3 months. It changes that fast at this point for us. So we think there will be a day when it is an absolutely viable solution for any kind of content that will make it a better experience for the audience. That's really what we're concerned about the most, is if the synthetic voice sounds right, if the performance is compelling, if the translation is captures the subtlety and emotion that it needs to in the story, and if you choose to employ lip manipulation, that is completely seamless and not noticeable. Then I think it opens up really the true sense of globalized content. It doesn't matter where something is produced, as if it's a good story and it's compellingly told. It does not matter what language that was created in. It can be adapted into any other language. And I think that's really what we're looking for in a global marketplace.
I mean, for theatrical productions, your high-end stuff, how much dubbing is coming with lip reanimation versus not?
For us, zero.
So it's still just the language at this point?
We're not employing lip manipulation for any level of product at this point right now.
Okay.
Again, keeping an eye on it. It's getting better all the time. For short bursts, I think you can make it work, but for any length of time, our own opinion is it doesn't hold up, and it takes the audience a bit out of the story, and no reason for us to dive into that yet until it improves.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. On lip reanimation, I agree 100%. It's very early on. It is the most exciting piece of localization and dubbing. Google is kind of like in our testing phase with a few customers. We expect something to be launched probably early 2026, but the use cases are very narrow. You can expect like a podcast or a news show, single speaker staring right at the screen, not much complexity happening. It can do a good job, but when you're thinking about a scene like in The Matrix where Neo's like spinning around a bunch of bullets, like it's not going to do a good job with that. The way things are moving, though, it may all change in a few months. But I just want to say most exciting piece, but still very early for lip reanimation.
So describe Google's product offerings in, I guess, the dubbing area.
Yeah, I think Gray touched on a few pieces. So we're thinking about it in a few different buckets. For synthetic voices, we have a catalog of voices you can choose from. I think we have like 35 really high quality voices in a number of different languages. We really see those use cases happening for promotional videos, educational content, short form video. When you want to get into more like A-list content, we really see it more of like a voice cloning product that's needed, in which we're building a lot of features to safely deploy what we are calling voice cloning. So you have to submit a video of yourself, saying that you are the owner of this voice and you give consent for it to be cloned. We've also developed some synthetic watermarking technology that is imperceptible to the ear, but that systems can detect if something has been generated with AI. So that's really important. And then very strict terms of service on how these AI voices will be used. So we're attacking it from a few different angles, but we really see two big buckets: either synthetic voices or what brand voices or clone voices that are needed.
So what's a typical project look like for you in this area?
Yeah, so dubbing is where I get super passionate. I mean, like 2 years ago, I can remember the first time I cloned my voice and then had played it back in Spanish, and I was just like, whoa, this is the coolest thing that I've ever done. And that was part of the reason I founded Adapt. It's if you hear yourself, and you can go on Adapt Global's YouTube site, and you can watch a whole bunch of videos. Our real sync videos where we're manipulating lips, and you can watch me speak 7 different languages with my lips moving as if I spoke them perfectly. And it's enchanting, right? It's like, that's how I want to watch Squid Games. Oh my God, give me that actor with his or her lips moving, speaking English as if they are still a Korean actor that learned perfect English.
I don't want to watch you perform Squid Games.
Right, no, exactly. That should not be, maybe Squid Game's 18. But no, and it is super enchanting, right? That is a way that localization content should be had. We should be able to see that actor, their performance in any language with their lips moving. And so where we get to have that fun, lighting is really tough with lip manipulation. So I'm super transparent about the models we use and look forward to hopefully one day using Google's. Right now we use SyncSo. They were like the guys who kicked off the lip manipulation revolution. Some guys out in India that started playing with it and figured it out. And we use LipDub by Mars. And we integrate them together with some automation. And then we have some color grade automation that we put on top, right? That's Adapt's shtick. Is we take all these tools, put them together and make it better. We get to do that for education customers. Well-lit content where someone's coming up and saying, hey kids, I'm gonna teach you about math today, and let's do 2 + 2 = 4. And you do that and you can reanimate that teacher's lips, and it's immersive. It's really, really cool. So we do that, we get to have that offering there. 90% of the dubs we are doing go to YouTube, even if they're traditional media content providers. They go to YouTube, and that's a big trend that's happening in the world right now, where traditional media is putting their content on YouTube. So it gives traditional media companies a playground to play, right? Let me try this out and see how this goes. But you get great watch times. I mean, Goalcast is a big YouTube customer of ours. You can check out Unseen, Spanish, Espanol, and you can see our dubs on there. And we get, 20 million views, 20-minute watch durations. I mean, people are watching this content. And then you'll even get quotes being like, wow, this is a great dub. So glad you guys don't use AI dubbing. And so it's starting with YouTube. Right now, we finally have a deal with a big global OTT provider that's doing their back catalog, like the movies that they would just never dub otherwise because, they're probably not the best content maybe, but now you can release that content in more languages and see if you can have a fit. So I think it's starting to shift into fast channel. To me, the hierarchy is kind of like YouTube is your first playground, then fast channels, then maybe some international broadcast channels, and then you're going to sort of major OTT and event one day theatrical. But yeah, today YouTube is probably the majority of what our content is landing on.
So looking at your revenue, feel free not to answer this. I mean, what % is captioning, what % is dubbing?
For us, captioning, subtitle is an add-on service. So historically, when I was at Deluxe, we would do the dub, and then you'd have a totally separate team and do the subtitle, and the subtitle wouldn't match the dub. And there's two reasons for that. One, they're different processes. But two, you can make this argument that if you're hearing me speak and you turn on the subtitle and I'm speaking too fast, that you might translate the subtitle to have like a better reading speed. And so you can make the argument that the subtitle should be different than the dub. I would argue that they shouldn't, that if you turn on the sub, you're probably like, what? Well, I couldn't hear what they said, and you want the subtitle to match the dub. But today, if you turn on the sub and it doesn't match the dub, it's because it was done by a different team, and it was timed differently. It was adapted differently for reading speed. We create dub titles, which means the sub matches the dub, and we throw that in for free. So not a lot of revenue. So our revenue is 90% dubbing and 10% time text, caption, or subtitle. But dubbing is where the revolution is. I mean, dubbing's 75% cheaper. Captioning or subtitles are like 30% cheaper. But because you're not bringing 10 actors into a brick and mortar studio to all record, you're getting way cheaper. The last point I say, and I warned you that I was overly passionate about this, we still employ like former dubbing directors or linguists to craft these dubs. So, if we're doing a dub for somebody for YouTube or for Fast Channel, we are employing a well-paid linguist in France or Germany or Japan, anywhere in the world, and they are going on and they're literally spending like 10 hours crafting these voices with AI in our AI platform, which is making API calls underneath to 11 Labs, hopefully Google one day, Deep Dub, et cetera. And so there's still an artistic component here. That I don't see, if I have an argument to make, that doesn't go away. That there's still an artist driving this.
That is important. We're noticing the same thing in the dubbing that we do that employs AI anywhere in the supply chain. It absolutely requires that artistic point of view to help drive it and do it. The performance is a big piece of it. Did you get enough performance out of the original? If you based it on an original actor performance and then layered on a different voice onto it, you're still relying on that original performance, and did you get enough out of that? If it's purely synthetic voice, then is it able to emote and do the things that it needs to do? Somebody has to make that decision. And so we find that's still a really valuable piece of the supply chain that I'm not sure we see go away either, in most cases anyway.
Are we talking about localization? And we talked about captions and then dubbing, so where does localization fit in to that whole spectrum?
To me, localization is that umbrella, right? Like accessibility is the biggest umbrella, and then localization, right? Because accessibility can be, I need audio description. Maybe I can't see, so I need someone to say, Gray is breathing in while Justin's talking and thinking, and so like that audio description, or I need captions because I can't hear. That's accessibility. Localization to me is a subset of accessibility. Say they don't speak the language, so they need to hear it. So to me, localization is subtitles and dubs.
Gray, do you think that, because I would think localization is going to be very important, because if you want to deliver something to a German viewer, it's got to be German. It can't just be German text.
No, 100%. Every piece of new content we create gets localized in some way, based on our rights. And it's up to the sales team to go find a sale for it. So if we hold those rights, we better find a way to monetize it. That's the point of view. And so everything is actually getting localized in one form or another based on the customs of that territory or the budget. Sometimes it doesn't, maybe it wouldn't warrant a dub, but a subtitle is okay, and we'll just create the subtitle. But one or the other is absolutely getting employed based on the rights. Yeah, it's that important.
How does that work in your organization? Because you've got somebody in charge of captioning, I presume, and somebody in charge of the dubbing. Is localization a piece of both? Is that somebody who sits here? I mean, how does that work?
Yes, the way we view localization is it's sort of the broad heading for dubbing, subtitling, accessibility services. It's the process of creating a piece of content for a local audience in different parts of the world.
So it's all the above.
So it's sort of the umbrella term that people are using. They call it localization or globalization, something like that. There's another component to it, though, which is sort of gaining a little bit of momentum in that umbrella, which is culturalization. Mm-hmm. And that's actually really diving more into the very specific cultural aspects of certain territories that may be consuming a piece of product. So you may think something isn't really big of a deal, but in this particular territory, it actually is a big deal and it actually means something than it was really intended in the original piece. And unless you understand that cultural subtlety, you wouldn't have changed it in the localization process. So understanding those culturalized moments, actually you end up with a much better dub or subtitle, understanding those pieces. So culturalization is sort of another aspect, I think, to this overall umbrella of localization, for us anyway.
So Nick, your company is delivering the pieces of that. How do you manage the localization and the culturalization side? Is that something you guys play in, or are you expecting the customers who come to you to deliver that for themselves?
Yeah, I'm going to hit on the same points. We look at localization as a broad umbrella. And within localization, there's a lot of tools or pieces of technology you could use, whether it's dubbing or captioning or lip reanimation. We're building those individual pieces to be modular, so people could use them in any way that they want. I think it really depends on what that team is ready for and what they want to take on. We really do see a broad spectrum of people who are just wanting to do captioning to start and then waiting for the other pieces to kind of be more mature. And we see some groups of people that kind of want to lean in on all of it and just see what they can do. So from our perspective, we have the platform and people can pick and choose where they want to start.
Okay. So great. Talk about the legal, guardrails you have in place. You've got, if you're going to clone somebody's voice, I imagine there's big issues there. How do you see that?
So as usual, technology is far outpacing legislation in this space, and decisions have to be made because the cost savings aspects of this are so compelling. It is really tempting people like us to just dive in and move forward. But there really are some legal ramifications that we have to consider along the way in every aspect of AI, not just localization, by the way. But in the localization space particularly, I don't feel like we've completely sorted out what an approach is for how we would craft language in an actor's contract in order to carve those rights out to clone their voice. I think we would have to go back to them each time and make sure they understand what it is, give them a chance to look at it. So I still think that's an issue that we have to pay attention to. The other force that's coming into this right now is the foreign dubbing unions, some of which are very strong, and they are imposing particular wording in the rights assignment documents that we use. So when you dub something, there is an assignment of rights document that goes along with that, where you are buying out the rights of the performance by that actor. In the traditional sense, pretty much a no-brainer. A few guardrails around there, you making sure you're acquiring the rights, they're turning over, based on what you're buying, let's say worldwide rights in perpetuity in all media, to use their performance in whatever way you want, and we now own those rights, that performance. But now, that blanket wording is really not comforting enough for voice performers because they value their work, which we do too, and they see a real threat in the synthetic voice options that AI bring. And so we engage in direct negotiations with these unions, sometimes in conjunction with our service providers, sometimes directly. Ultimately, it's on us, so we take a particularly active role in that. And we respect those voice artists' rights. So we built in protections for them that says we will not use their performance in a way that was not originally intended. We will not alter the tone and timbre or other specific wordings of their performance unless we come back to them and negotiate for those rights, which may or may not include an additional payment. So that sets us up for what our approach is. If we want a traditional dubbing job, we are going to hire union actors, and we're going to go the traditional workflow, and we will give them all those protections that they ask for. If we're going to choose that budget line item or that value dub job, then we may choose to not use a union actor, so we don't run afoul of any of those. We will use a non-union performance, layering in the AI tools on top of that, and go about it that way. So those, I think, are how we're operating today, enough to let us take advantage of the economies here. But there are still some unanswered questions a part of this. What will an artist think about doing the lip manipulation, cloning their voices, all of those kinds of things. I think those are still a bit up in the air.
Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll add a couple things. I mean, one is I think mostly it's actually kind of worked out to just like do the right thing, which is a nice place to land, right? Which is like obviously don't take someone's voice without their permission and use it in a dub. And most of the voice actor agreements landed there. Like I am the George Clooney of France, and there's a really adorable movie called Being George Clooney that you can watch if you want to know about these actors. But there's some person who is the voice of George Clooney in France. You can't take their voice, right? Like you can't do that, right? And that to me seems pretty obvious. And so when we're creating a dub for somebody, we're usually going to an 11 Labs or Deep Dub library, grabbing in a voice from somebody who uploaded their voice. They'll get a royalty payment when we grab that voice, and then we overlay it on top, and then we give a dub card that says this voice is used. So I think that's the good news. I think the other thing, though, as Nick and I were talking before, after we stopped wrestling around, and Nick was talking about how to do clones on Google, they want it to be really locked down. And I thought that was really interesting and really neat. And we were talking about how 11 Labs, which is, for those of you who don't know, 11 Labs is valued at $6 billion. They're a bit of a unicorn backed by A16Z, but they arguably are one of the leaders in the voice AI space. When I clone my voice on 11 Labs, they do not ask. You could just clone it, right? And so they're taking more. They're as normal startups, I think, are taking more leaps in the space than when Google will come along and when Lionsgate will come along and they'll do it with more guardrails around it. But the good news is, I think generally, if you feel like you can stand behind it, that yes, this is a voice that I used that someone gave to use it, you're okay.
Yeah, there's a lot here that needs to be figured out. I think it's kind of all playing out in real time. From Google's perspective, we're building the tech with a lot of the safeguards I mentioned before, whether it's approval to use the voice, synthetic watermarking, or the very strong language that we have with a lot of our products. So we're going about it from that aspect. And as much as we want things to move in a particular direction, we have to wait for the agreements to be made and people to all agree that this stuff can be used at scale. But we're trying to make the tech available as fast as we can.
The other aspect of this, just really briefly, is the front end of this, which is protections around the data sets that were used to train these models in the first place. Where they use legitimately, will they indemnify us if we are going to use that service and put it out in the marketplace? Is there any opportunity for somebody to come after me because that's some guy's voice that he read an audiobook back in the 70s that happened to get used to train a model? And so understanding the data sets and the provenance of those data sets is also becoming more important the deeper we get into this content.
And I'll just add one point there. I think Google is typically, I'm not going to say slow to release products, but we take a lot of time to make sure we don't run into situations like this. So for any of our products that are GA, we do have the indemnification language that Google will stand by you using that product out in the marketplace. Anything that's pre-GA, we don't have, but that's why we really are, what we see is that companies wait for that product to have that language before they're actually going to put it out there.
Let me open up the questions at this point. We've got some more questions from me, but anybody out there have a question they want to ask? So let's wait to.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
So really quick, you guys touched very briefly on the use cases for live translation and how that has a lot of potential. A lot of the discussion, though, is on the on-demand use cases. You have time, you process it, then you do distribution. So for live events, sporting events, games, or even in Google's case, there's been some recent announcements on video conferencing and translation in real time. Can you talk about what's emerging in that space and what you think the opportunity is? Is there more lenience because it's live and translating a broadcaster who may be covering a game that's then getting distributed out of the country? Can you walk through where the state of the market is there?
I can touch on it briefly. I mean, I think depending on the particular use case, in my opinion, it doesn't seem like many people are ready to fully take on live translation. I mean, when you think about a sports game or news or a debate, I mean, there are teams of people that are working on that, and they've gotten the latency up to a really good point. AI can fill in what that current workflow is, but the latency isn't the same. And from what I've seen, there's just a lot of reluctance to kind of go after that one right now, just maybe because either the tech isn't there or the teams aren't really ready for it. So we do have some ability and product to do it, but from what I've seen, it's more slow moving on the live side.
I mean, we at Adapt, a more small company, we just made the choice not to go after that. We just felt like the people that I'm going to hire that are going to craft a high-end dub that Gray would one day want for his TV shows or his movies would be different than the requirements for live, and that product market fit felt different enough to just not tackle it. But Ash is here from SyncWords, so I'll throw out to a buddy. Like, he is doing live dubbing, and it's just a different product, it's a different marketplace. And his approach though is like Adapt's. I'm not ever going to attempt to build models to try to handle live if I went after live. I would use Google, and so he's like embedding Google and other people underneath to do it. But yeah, live to me is just a different beast. Yeah, but obviously huge potential. Huge potential. We are in talks with some customers about like we do 8-hour turns for a big news company, where it's like, hey, we're going to pick these news stories by 8 hours. We're going to flip them around. But and so I think we're in talks of more of that.
I had a question about tone. You mentioned, the borrowing of tone of an actor, and it seems like that's probably one of the most challenging things, because if you think of like Siri and McKellen saying, "You shall not pass," right? And he gives it a read. Yeah. So then you're dubbing, and a human actor dubbing is an actor, so they can figure that out. But an AI doing, for instance, Kindle books can't act. How do you do it? How are we going to handle that particular challenge? Is it borrowing the tone of the original language, or what?
Yeah, I mean, there's concepts around performance capture, where you capture that original performance. That's one way. TTS engines are getting better, where like I can say, Justin says, yes, that's true, but then I can put, in a sad, and it'll be like, yes, that's true. And so you will, you can actually prompt literally in the TTS, which is really fun. And then the last thing is we call our linguists cultural ambassadors. We wanted to give them a cooler name, a bigger name, not just a post editor or something. And then we do give them we like them to have some acting skills. I would say 10% of the time they're picking up the microphone at home and actually speaking into the model. And so, because if it's just not coming out right with TTS, they will do a little bit of acting, I guess I would say. Yeah.
I actually do have confidence that AI will be able to do a very good job at simulating performances that were already done. I don't think it's there yet. That's one of the big barriers as to why we're not diving in on the scripted side. But I do think that its ability to approximate something that exists today, that's the advantage of AI. That's what it can do. I don't think it can have inspiration, so it couldn't have come up with that first performance. So it wouldn't have been as good as Syrian doing that, but I do think it can approximate the reality of something that already exists. And so I know that there are AI tools that are really focused on performance and performance enhancement and giving a synthetic voice or a synthetic actor a better ability to perform like what you're talking about. So if there's a good guide, I do think that it will get there, and that's something we're keeping an eye on also, because it is a big deal.
Any other questions? Let's finish up. Why don't you, Justin, give us the pitch for the managed services compared to do it yourself. So what's your value proposition in a minute or less?
Yeah, I mean, I think 90% of the time people come to Adapt because they don't speak the languages. Right? Like at the end of the day, you need someone who speaks that language. And I think Adapt goes a step farther in saying we're not just hiring linguists. We are hiring linguists that really know localization and know how to adapt, no pun intended, that content to that other country. And so the managed service is the technology platform that moves the content through. It is a linguist with the expertise, and then it's the project management skill sets to get it done for high-end media companies. And then we're going to partner with tech companies underneath that.
So Nick, for you, is DIY descriptive, or are you more closer to a managed service than we might think from a Google perspective?
I mean, Google provides the infrastructure and the APIs to run all these things at scale. Some people want to build it themselves. Some people want to be very close to the stack and own every piece of the layer. Some people have existing workflows that they just want to integrate the APIs into. And some people, even if they work at a large company, they might be a smaller group or sub within that company, and they'll probably need a system like Justin's built, which is kind of all inclusive and can get them started much quicker. So from our perspective, we have a number of different options, and it really just depends on the team on where they want to get started and how.
So great to put you on the spot and finish this sentence. In 5 years, subbing will be accomplished by
Subtitling, did you say?
Subtitles.
Will be accomplished by?
or subbing. So voice
Dubbing.
dubbing. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, dubbing will be accomplished by a combination of technology and human intervention for a much lower cost.
Okay, that's all we have time for.